Director Nancy Brown, AAUW of Oregon, who has arranged all of this wonderful Zoom stuff. I'm a camp counselor, Pat Squire, and I'm the program VP for AAUW Oregon. But I want to do a little shout out to our two camp bosses, our big bosses, Pat Lehman and Sue Klumpf. If you would both say hi and wave to people.
And thank you. Thank you, Director and Counselor, for your wonderful leadership. And thank you, everybody. And Kelly, thank you for leading us today. And for everybody who are attending. This is great.
Absolutely. But if we're considered the bosses, we're only the bosses of s'mores. Just to clarify.
So part of the reason that we are having these sessions is because Pat and Sue called all of the branch presidents in the state over the last couple of months to find out what you all wanted to learn this summer at our camp. So it was partly due to their calls that we have established these programs that we're having over the next couple of weeks. So I want to know how many of you went to camp? Raise your hands. How many of you had kids and or grandkids who went to camp? Okay, so if you have teenagers that have been at camp over the last 10 or 15 years, you probably know that it's right about now that those camp counselors are going to come around and confiscate their devices, right? They don't allow cell phones at camp, do they? Maybe. So point being, if you've got a cell phone near you or something else like that, please turn it off so it doesn't interfere with our conversation. So the cool thing,
and please mute yourself.
Yes. Or Nancy will
going to talk.
So the cool thing about this camp is that we're not in a dorm. We're not in a hot dorm that doesn't have air conditioning. We're not eating camp food. We're at home eating our own snacks and having our own beverages. We're here wearing our yoga pants and our slippers, or whatever it is you're wearing. Maybe you're wearing a bathing suit. Anyway, we think that this is going to be a great program over the next week.
Oops. Pat, I muted you. Sorry, stop waiting.
We just want you to remember that we are all volunteers, including all of our speakers, and we want you to participate to your highest level possible. So now to Camp Counselor Kelly. Kelly is back by popular demand. She was at our summer conference last year and was wildly popular. She's a senior instructor, public relations at the School of Journalism and Communication at University of Oregon. Several of us have degrees from there as well. So she's been working in public relations for 2 decades. And what's cool about her is that she's smart, she's strategic, she's a good presenter, she speaks to us in our kind of language. She teaches classes in crisis communications, which is pretty important these days, social media and digital strategy. She spoke as I mentioned, she spoke last summer, and she was scheduled to speak at our April convention in Vancouver. So here is Kelly Matthews, back by popular demand. Take it away, Kelly.
Great. Thank you. So nice to be here. I have a slide deck here, so we're going to move over to that. So I was, oops, let me hit the wrong button when I do that. I was asked to chat about social media and advocacy, with a specific angle on advocacy. I will tell you that this is mostly social media with a smattering of advocacy. So it's designed in mind to really start with some basics and some foundational stuff, and make sure you're there, because it's very difficult to build community or to get a conversation going if you don't have the basics and you don't have a basic foundation. So we'll start with some of the basics. Some of it may feel a little, for those of you who may have been in the presentation last summer, Some of it may be a little bit familiar because I tend to use a lot of the same advice for people who are in basic mode. And if you saw me in more than one presentation, some of it might have some familiar echoes, but as most people, including myself, sometimes it takes a couple of times to hear it and a couple of times to understand what to apply to my own work and what to apply to the organizations that I work with. So I hope that you find some usefulness out of it. So a couple of logistics things. I am happy to take questions as we go. If you want to leave them in the chat on Zoom, that would be helpful. I will admit that I'm not great at multitasking, both presenting and tracking chat. So I've asked my TAs today to help me track those conversations. I'm happy to answer them as we go if I can do so. If it's something where I need to show you, if I need to demo something, or provide an example, I may say let's hold off and I'll answer that at the end because Zoom's not great for kind of bouncing in and out of different programs. So, but I will answer what I can as we go. And I'm hoping that we'll be at least a little bit interactive. That's, again, sometimes difficult in this format, but hoping that I can answer your questions and we can have some conversations. So, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start with kind of thinking about why social media. So I have been doing social media for brands and organizations for about a dozen years. So I was lucky enough very early on in social media world, and having that set of tools in my toolbox, that in my consulting business, I had a client who let me play and let me play in a sandbox. So I've been doing social media work for a long time, and I've often asked, both by potential consulting clients, by organizations, and then in my classes, you know we need to be on social media, or we know we need to put things on Facebook. So how do we do that? And what do we do? But I'm going to ask everybody to back up just a little bit and think about it a little more strategically. So we're going to try a little interactivity here. So I assume you're here because either you help manage social media for your branch, or you're interested in doing a better job with social media for your branch. So why? What's exciting about that? Why social media?
Go ahead and unmute yourself and just respond.
Yeah, just holler it out. We'll catch you.
Important to communicate during COVID.
Yeah, for sure, right? So we're communicating a lot more digitally and a lot more online.
It's free.
A lot more online. It's free.
Mm-hmm. It's great to do it based, in geographical and to see what's going on with your family in other parts of the nation or world.
Yeah, for sure. So it's easy to collapse some of those boundaries that may normally exist, whether it's in, geographic boundaries or neighborhoods or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. The others?
A necessary evil.
It's a necessary evil.
It's a primary way of communicating.
What was
immediate? A necessary good.
Time saving.
Time saving.
It's a good way to target an audience.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have the ability to have a targeted audience for sure.
You can reach people outside your bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's potentially a broader reach. Great. Okay, good. So lots of good reasons.
As new co-president of the AAUW of Oregon, I have been so impressed with the range of technology that we are using or are learning to use. And there's a great deal that I need to learn. And I'm really looking forward to knowing more about all the different platforms that we're involved with.
Great. Okay, so those lots of very good reasons, and all absolutely spot on with what I hear from lots of organizations. So there's a counter to that, right? So what are the biggest barriers? What's getting in your way of success?
It can get overwhelming.
It can be overwhelming for sure.
My issue is primarily dealing with privacy issues online and what's going on with that. In California, we have the new California communications thing that's kind of similar to the GDPR in the European Union. So any kind of, customers, Amazon or, a California-based company has to address those privacy issues. So that's a big one for me.
Okay, great.
I think the biggest barriers for a lot of us are getting expertise in how to manage all the platforms and how to produce what we want to produce.
Great. Okay, absolutely.
Yes, lack of technological knowledge.
Yeah, that definitely can, and kind of to the first point is it can feel overwhelming, right? So this combination of factors can be overwhelming.
I want to
People who
add.
don't want to know about it.
I'm sorry, say again?
People who don't want to know about the technology or use it.
Sure, right? So you need to communicate using social channels or digital channels, but you may have a resistant audience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. How to do it without compromising the integrity of your own systems and your own personal data.
Okay, great.
And I just wanted to say, getting people to look at what you're putting out there.
Right. Absolutely. It's hard to do. I mean, social media platforms aren't charities, unfortunately, I guess. I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but their business model is not to show your organization's stuff for free. It's to get you to pay for ads. So social media, one of the biggest frustrations for brands who have used it for a long time is it's harder and harder to get reach. It's harder and harder to get people to see what you're posting because it's turned into a pay-for-play kind of model where you need to put some money into boosts and advertising on those channels in order to get the kind of reach that we used to get for free. So it can be frustrating for sure.
And that's a comment we had from Linda from Tigard. She said, how do you reach a specific target audience? It sometimes feels like we are just talking to ourselves. And I understand that. If we're reaching out to our members, but not broader, how do we reach a target audience? And I bet you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about it, but I'll answer a little bit of that to start with, in that it's kind of that pay for play consideration. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a big budget at all. Like it can be a pretty minimal budget to reach an audience, or you have to be comfortable with slow and steady wins the race. And you have to be comfortable with spending a little more time cultivating audiences and creating content in order to get to reach new folks and to try lots of different things, because it's a little bit of a slow and steady process, to be sure. So I mean, on the flip side, I mean, that's sort of a downer comment in a way, but on the flip side, it's very easy and very inexpensive to reach a new audience with your message. So with, just maybe $50 a month or $20 a month, you could even reach a considerable number of people who wouldn't see your content otherwise. I think the stat I saw one time, and sometimes I make up stats, so this may not be exactly right, but the stat I saw one time was like for an average of $1 a day, you could reach like 4,000 new people a month, something like that, which feels pretty accurate from what I've seen in managing social budgets. So just to plant that seed, you can certainly, so the two distinctions are either organic or paid. And so you can certainly have organic strategy, which is just the content and connection and conversation on social channels. Again, sometimes it can be slow and it can feel like you're talking to yourself or you're shouting into the ether. But if you, but with some tips and tricks, you can build that audience. Or I sometimes refer to it as goosing the stats a little bit. With a little bit of money, you can sort of get yourself over that hump to be able to get your content out to more people. And again, it doesn't take a lot of budget, and it can outsmart outsmart the algorithm, so to speak, and get your information out to a very targeted group of people. But we kind of back up another step, right? So we want to maximize that potential. We want to maximize what you're excited about and keep that momentum and keep that idea, but minimize those barriers. And really the only way to do that is to have a plan. So I would encourage you in your branches, if you haven't thought about, it doesn't have to be a complicated plan, but if you don't have a communications plan that includes social media or even a specific social media plan, if you have someone who's taken that on specifically, please do. Otherwise, you're doing hair on fire social media. Oh my God, it's Tuesday. What are we going to post about today? And who's got it? And do you have the picture? Or I don't have the picture. I'm supposed to be on Twitter or whatever it is. So put out the hair on fire and have a plan to be able to be thoughtful, and then you can know if it's working or if it's not. So you have to make a plan. And when you're making a plan, you don't start with what do we post on Facebook. You start with a couple of really basic questions. So the first is, what do you want to accomplish, right? Do you want to gain new members? Do you want to reach potential voters? Do you want to let the community know about the work that you're doing? And who's the community? So what do you want to accomplish? And you don't have to have a singular purpose. It can be a multi-pronged, multi-objective plan, but you have to know what you want to accomplish. If you don't, you won't know if you get there, right? So, and then the other part is, who are you trying to reach? So if you're trying to reach people like you and people who are like your members, then think about who that is and think about who's going to be interested in the content that you have to share. We like to tag this younger audience onto Facebook. I don't know if it's human nature or just out of habit. And so if you want to reach a quote younger audience, you have to understand and really be thoughtful about what that means and who that audience is and why do they care about what you're posting. They may, depending on who you're talking to, younger is a pretty diverse group, right? So younger may be younger. I'm not typically in the group that is referred to as a younger audience anymore. But women in their 40s is a group that's going to be might have different interests than women in their 30s, and they're going to have different interests than women in their 20s. And so thinking about how those are different and where should your priorities be, right? Where are you going to get the most bang for the buck? Is it women in their 40s because they're starting to think about civic participation and starting to think about where to spend their time and money? Is it women in their 30s because they're in the peak of their career and so they're particularly interested in issues related to women's work and equal pay? Is it women in their 20s because those darn millennials, the younger end of those millennials and Gen Zs, are very civically minded and civically active? They're unlikely, to be blunt, they're very unlikely to want to join, but they may be likely to participate in some sort of campaign or initiative, or at least understand the issues. Millennials and Gen Z are a little bit notorious about not joining groups. They don't, and are very anti-hierarchy. And so it makes, I was in Rotary for a long time and they had the same issue, right? It was the same challenge recruiting younger audience because of the demographic differences. So if you think about who are the women you're reaching and what are they interested in, that helps to drive this plan, right? So if I'm interested in raising awareness, making sure people are women in my community are familiar with the issues that we advocate for and participate in, so they know what AAUW is for when they are ready to join or they are ready to participate, then that's different kinds of content than join us. Be a member, be part of our group, right? So it's different. And so understanding who your audience is really important. And then thinking about what you have to say. So AAUW has a tremendous amount of content available and around issues and around topics. And so if you think about what are the things that you have to say, what are the issues that you participate in as a branch, what are the issues you participate in at the state and the national level, what are the things that your members care about, what are the, are you affiliated or connected to a university, or what are the pieces of the puzzle for you? What do you have to talk about? And then the last part is what goes where, right? So it's not, you don't start with what do we post on Facebook today. You end with we have stuff to say, and this stuff very specifically works best for Facebook. So this is what we're going to post there. So it's coming at it from a different angle. Okay, so a couple of different things to think about. I think if I don't know how we could do this quickly, but maybe for those hands I can see, how many branches are on Facebook? I think I can see most of you. Okay. How many are on Instagram? So wrong one. Okay. Twitter? No. 1, 2. Okay. What else do we have on here? Pinterest. Okay, so mostly Facebook. Okay, that's what I thought. I think those were the stats Georgia and I have talked about before, but so mostly Facebook. I also included, I don't know why those images blew out like that. Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube, but I'll focus just on a couple of these for the sake of our discussion. So the best kind of content on Facebook is images or video. Both of those should be high quality. So we went through in social media, we went through this phase where we liked really amateur looking photos and videos because gosh, we could all do it. And now our phones and our cameras and our ability to edit just based on having no skills is much higher. So we collectively have a higher demand and a higher appetite and expectation for quality content and quality photos and quality video. We also, news links work well on Facebook. So when you post a link and you get that image that comes up as a preview image, that also works well on Facebook content. I know that feels very basic, but if you're posting just text, people won't see it. It just doesn't get the kind of reach that videos or images do. So take the time to find an image to share and to share with your post. There are a lot of places to get free photos. So it doesn't even have to be photos that you own or that your branch owns, although that's ideal. Your own content is always best. Original content's always best. But there are some sites where you can get royalty-free, copyright-free images to use on social media that can help fill in the gaps on that. And my favorite place to do that is a site called Pixabay, Pixabay. And it's an aggregator, so it pulls in from a few different free photo sites and actually does a pretty nice job. I pay for a stock subscription site because I do a lot of content, and I still get stuff from Pixabay because it's often better for certain things than the paid site that I have. So it's a great site. And in fact, I pulled quite a few of those. I do the newsletter for the Eugene branch, and I pull photos from Pixabay all the time for that newsletter because I look for, have been looking for historical photos and some, suffragette photos and some of the content, and have found some really good ones on there. So it's a great site. There's no excuse for not having good images. Obviously, but I'll say it, be careful about using images that aren't yours and don't come from copyright-free, royalty-free sites. I could tell you my own stories and stories of other people who have gotten in trouble for doing that. So just be careful. Don't do a Google image search and pull an image. That's kind of a no-no. And photographers sometimes get legally angry at you for doing that. So you want to be careful. But there's really no excuse.
So Kelly, we have a question of someone wants to know how often we should post content to Facebook.
Okay, so I'm gonna say some numbers and it's gonna scare you, and then I'm gonna follow up that by saying, I'll actually start here. Just be consistent. Ideally, 3 to 4 times a week. More is fine. Daily is fine. I don't know. I will tell you, don't post more than about 4 times a day, and know that nobody actually has that problem. So, but don't post more than 4 times a day. So 3 to 4 times a week is a good amount, is a good stretch. You need to play a little bit with when, because it's gonna depend on your audience and depend on who you're trying to reach. I have 2 brands that I manage their social for, and one, if I don't post it before 8 a.m., I get nothing, and another one, if I don't post it between 4 and 6 p.m., I get nothing. So sometimes you need to play a little bit with the timing. Facebook does let you schedule posts, so that doesn't mean you need to be on Facebook 4 days a week in order to post. You can plan that in advance, and you can schedule in advance, and it's very, very simple to do from your page. If it's helpful, I can show you how to do that when we're done here. I can pull up a Facebook page and show you how to do that. So 3 to 4 times a week. I would say once a week is probably minimum, but what somebody mentioned earlier is it feels like you're talking to yourself. Facebook's algorithm is such that only about 3 to 5% of your audience, of your followers on your page, will see any given post organically. Now that's before it gets shared or commented on or liked. All of those things boost that up. But 3 to 5%, if you have, a couple hundred fans or a couple hundred followers, is not very many people. And so I always think about it as a return on investment equation. If I'm going to spend even 30 minutes coming up with a post to post on Facebook once a week for 10 people, is that worth my time? Probably not. but you can think about how that, you can think about that equation, right? So you can think about what makes sense. But if I spend a couple of hours and I'm really thoughtful and I tag people and I reach out and I really try to build a conversation around the content, which takes time, but now I'm going to reach maybe 100 people or 300 people, or it's going to get shared beyond my page, then yeah, that's better. I will also tell you that it generally is not the same. We'll just use 10 as a number. It's usually not the same 10 people. So different mix of people will see your post each time you post it. Your super fans will see it every time. The people who like every single piece of content will see every single piece of content. But outside those 3 or 4 people, you'll reach a mix. So if you're posting 3 or 4 times a week, even if it's that slow and steady formula where it's just a little pieces, you're building the number of people who are seeing your content, and you're not just reaching the same people every time. It does feel like that at first, for sure. So be patient because it definitely feels like that. So Facebook is definitely the primary channel, I think, for most brands, most branches for sure, but definitely most brands. The rumors of its death are greatly exaggerated. It's not going anywhere. So it's worth understanding and knowing how to use it. It does trend a little older, and by older, I mean the average age is like mid-30s. So it's an older platform than Instagram, which is a younger platform, or which isn't on here, but I didn't ask, is anybody on TikTok? Because that could be a whole different conversation this week. TikTok is definitely younger. Twitter tracks pretty closely with Facebook in terms of age. Those of us who started on social media a dozen years ago, we were the younger audience when we started, and we've all gotten older as the platforms have gotten older. So So if you're on Twitter, Twitter can be useful if you have an audience that's not necessarily just your local people. Maybe with the exception of people in Portland, because there is kind of a critical mass of people on Twitter in Portland. But outside of that, it can be really tough to build a local audience on Twitters. But if you have it because you want to share, you want to build your audience regionally or nationally, which I don't know is a high priority for most branches, then Twitter can be a good platform. Twitter's much more real time and much lighter algorithm than Facebook and Instagram have. So if you have some real time content that you want to share, it can be worth building that audience there. But that can also definitely feel like you're shouting into the ether. And is overwhelming. I think Twitter is so unuser friendly to sort of get into and understand and be able to track. And I don't know that I would bother with it if I hadn't been on it for a really long time, because it's a little overwhelming. It's also not nearly as popular as it might seem because Twitter gets a lot of news coverage. Only about 16% of US adults have a Twitter account. So it's pretty much the lowest of all of these platforms on this list in terms of active users.
So Kelli, back to Facebook, and you can address this at the end if you want. Someone has asked about live videos on Facebook. So if you want to wait until the end, fine, but just throwing that out as a question about Facebook.
Sure. So is the question whether to do it or how to do it? Is it whether?
I think it's how you do it.
Okay. Yeah.
Talking about live videos.
We can look at that at the end.
Okay.
It can be a really great tool. Facebook Live can be a really great tool. So we can definitely talk about that. I'm going to kind of skip through these because I know it's not relevant for this purpose. Just a small pitch for each in case you're thinking about it. Pinterest is like 80% women. So it's a heavily female dominated platform. It's not all wedding dresses and mason jar crafts. They're actually useful. There's useful, good information there that gets shared and gets shared a lot. It's very window shoppy. So it's not a social network in the same way that Facebook or Twitter is, where the point is connecting with other people. The point is finding good content and finding content you like and saving it sort of on a pin board, right? So some of you may be using it personally and know what I'm talking about. I will also, just as another quick plug for Pinterest, it has fantastic search engine optimization, which is how people find things on Google. So if you have a campaign, like a Get Out the Vote campaign, and you have well-described boards and well-described pins, and are really thoughtful about the words you use when you're setting that up on Pinterest, it can be a great repository, a place to drive people to get information. So that's my plug if you're thinking about it. Everything needs a strategy, but I think it's worth more of a consideration than we tend to give it at first blush. Instagram is also great for that kind of younger audience. And again, we're talking about like under 40, not necessarily teenagers, but a great place to share photos and images. You have to have a photo and an image, so it's important to do that. And then hashtags are really important on Instagram. So hashtags are the pound sign with the word that follows. And on most platforms, when you do that hashtag turns into a link. So when you see #GOTV, which is Get Out the Vote, #GOTV, and you click on that on Instagram, you will see Get Out the Vote content. Like that's what it's for, is to collect, is to aggregate content, and to make content discoverable. So if I'm interested in Get Out the Vote content, I can click on that hashtag and find other organizations that are doing that. This was around sort of all sorts of social movements. That hashtag becomes really important and a really important way to get out information. We saw in early June, there was a Blackout Tuesday sort of movement across Instagram in particular, in support of Black Lives Matter. And so there was this movement where people were posting black squares and saying something about the post and then hashtagging Black Lives Matter. And people who were involved with that movement, it didn't take long for them to come to see, and this is like not individual people, but like lots of people paying attention to this, realize that my Instagram post or any individual's Instagram post that had that hashtag was appearing in those search results, but my Instagram post didn't have any resources. It was just a solidarity moment. And so there was sort of this second wave movement that day where people were like, please don't use that hashtag, because if people are looking for resources, they can't find them. So use Blackout Tuesday or use some other version of the hashtag to have your moment of solidarity, but then leave Black Lives Matter so that people who may actually be seeking resources specifically related to that can find them. So it's an extraordinarily important tool on Instagram in order to be able to connect people to resources, connect movements, connect topics, find other people that are talking about the same thing. It's a great way. It's both useful in that you can go on Instagram and find things, but it's also useful from an organization's perspective to find the hashtags that people are using for discoverability and people are using to find other content that's related to that. And we'll get into a little, again, this is mostly basics with a splash of advocacy, but that's one of my tips for advocacy is find those hashtags that are relevant. Is it get out the vote? Is it what is relevant so that you can advocate and connect with other people who are doing the same thing or connect with people who are looking for resources. And then YouTube is a great place for video. Obviously, that's what it's for. It's the second largest search engine behind Google. So people go straight to YouTube to search for stuff. That's definitely a younger audience thing to do, but although I think all of us probably search for YouTube videos for recipes or DIY projects, but people who are, in their 20s, teens and 20s, they don't even bother with Google. They just go straight to YouTube and search for what they're looking for. YouTube, of course, is owned by Google, so the findability is really high if you're hoping people find you via a Google search. So I would encourage you, as you're thinking about, we have Facebook, so that's what we need to fill. That's the bucket we need to fill, is to take inventory. So what do you have, right? So you've looked at what you have to say. Now, what assets do you have? Do you have newsletter articles that you can repurpose to social content? Do you have photos from events that you can use? And then the other side of that inventory is, what do you need? So what do you have and what do you need? And use it to figure out where to spend your time and energy and how you need to fill that in order to reach your objective. Inventory, again, could be photos, it could be video, it could be quotes, it could be history, it could be news and trend information, it could be data points, it could be any number of things. So you're in a data collection mode, a sorting and organizing mode at this point to figure out, let me back up a slide, what assets do you have? Do you have photos? Do you have historical information? Is somebody tracking the news to pull in, maybe set up a Google alert for some of the key issues that you're tracking that you want to talk about? What are those things that you can pull in order to fill the bucket that you have to fill? And then the last piece of this is and we're still in kind of this planning mode, and your last piece of this plan is to create a content calendar. So you have to make sure you have all this stuff coming in and you want to sort it into its file boxes so that your hair's not on fire on Tuesday around what you're going to post on Facebook, but you write, heck yeah, I've got Tuesdays figured out for 6 weeks. I don't have to think about that because I've planned it out and I have this calendar that helps me to track. Every Tuesday, I'm going to post a tip for getting involved. I don't know, that's the most random generic thing I could think about, but even a tip Tuesday. I'm a huge fan of alliteration. So you want Motivation Mondays, Tip Tuesdays, whatever works for you. That helps me remember what my calendar is if I alliterate. So you've got a Tip Tuesday. You can think about how are we going to fill that every week. Motivation Monday. There are a million motivational, inspirational women in the world that have said millions of beautiful words that you can borrow and you can talk about on a Motivation Monday post. So that should be easy. And people love quotes on social media. It's really kind of remarkable. So think about those things, the editorial calendar, and what you can fill. Things that might help you fill that bucket. What are the events that your branch is doing? You have at least a monthly meeting. That monthly meeting can probably be 4 to 6 different posts if you sort of split it apart, right? So we're announcing a speaker, reminder there's a meeting coming up. Here's a little bit of information about what we're going to talk about next week or in a couple of weeks. Hey, guess what? This thing is happening this week, and then a recap. I mean, that's a really just sort of crack it open and break it apart and think about all the pieces that you can get from one event, right? So most events are not a one-off. So how can you split it up and think about how to use that? And don't reinvent that wheel every time. Every month you've got the same thing. Every month you can follow the same formula, right? So you're not reinventing the wheel. You have the same cadence every month that you can use. You're just tweaking the content a little bit. There may be seasonal topics and themes. Obviously, we're 95 days away from an election, so that's definitely seasonally topical and on theme. Certainly local news and global news. There's 1 or 2 things happening in the world right now that are interesting to think about and talk about. Frequently asked questions. What do people want to know about your branch? Are there projects you're working on? Are there some behind the scenes things going on that could be interesting to people to understand who you are and how the organization works? Can you share the experience of being an AAUW member and how that looks and feels, and what can you do to help people understand what to expect? Most people's barrier to participating is, I don't know what to expect. I don't know how I'm going to fit. I don't know what I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I'm supposed to talk about. I don't want to show up and be awkward with a bunch of random strangers, even though I think I care about this cause. So if you can break that barrier down through showing, not telling, like showing you're welcome here. And this is what it looks like and feels like, so that when you show up at an event, you know what it is. There's no surprises. What are your values as a branch, as an organization? And is there anything kind of quirky about what you do and how you do it that people would find interesting? Like off-center printed t-shirts, for example. That isn't that is some quirk right there, is what I'm saying. So just some ideas, and get together with some, whoever is interested. Like, don't limit it to boards or committees. Like, who's interested and who has things that ideas that might be useful, and brainstorm a list. And that's, when I do this with clients, that's what we do, is we brainstorm a big list. And then we figure out what the themes are. So forget themes to start with. Let's just talk about what we have to say and what we have to share, and then sort it by theme. And then we end up with things like, Travel Tuesday or whatever it is. We don't start there. We kind of back into that. So brainstorm a list. Okay, so then here are my tips for advocacy. And I also have 3 links that I'm going to share with you that I found really helpful when I was prepping this today. Kind of doing final stuff earlier today that I will drop in the chat here in a second. But here are my tips, right? So you've got this great foundation. You have this plan. The first thing is leverage your members' personal social media. And by that, I mean, ask people to share your stuff. Hey, members, when you see a Facebook post, will you share it? Will you comment on it? Will you like it? Because that helps to reach that new audience, right? people have an average of, I think, 150 friends on Facebook. So if everyone in your branch shares, half the people in your branch share, you've just exponentially grown the number of people who see your stuff. But you often have to ask. Most people, especially at first, they may not see everything to start with, so it may not be any malintent. They just don't see it, and they don't know what they're supposed to do with it when they do. So ask, please share, please, and in this order: share, comment, like. Those are the most powerful. So you want people to share. That's ideal. Comment would be second, and like is third. So if people are like, I don't know what to do, I can also show you on Facebook. Remind me if I lose this thought when we get on there. You can on any page you follow, you can add you can prioritize the content on that page so that you see it first on your feed. So I have a couple of pages that I follow that I see first, even before my friends' stuff. When they post, I see it first. So you can ask members to do that, to prioritize the content. That will remind them to share, comment, and like. But leverage their personal social media. Chances are you have members in your branch that have exponentially greater reach than your branch page does on its own. So ask and leverage that. But know what you're asking and be clear and help people if they're not sure with how to find information and how to do what you're asking them to do. And the specific question that we talked about in our tech committee a couple weeks ago, and then in talking in advance of this, was specifically get out the vote, which is why I've been talking about that a couple of times and using that as an example. Because you're not able to canvass and you're not able to hang out and do voter registration drives, that's just not a thing that we can do right now. So what do you do instead? So the first, again, is leverage your members' personal social media. The next tip on here is create a toolkit with some sample content. And this may be something that maybe a few branches could get together and share. If you have somebody who's maybe a good designer or can help with some stuff, that have some sample posts, maybe some really easy graphics, some language to use, what hashtags do I use? Make it as simple as possible so it's just copy and paste, and makes it really easy for people to do what you're asking them to do, right? If I'm like, hey, share our Get Out the Vote campaign, you're like, oh yeah, I totally will do that. But then I sit on Facebook and I have to go find a picture, and now I have to figure out what to say, and what was that link I was supposed to send people to, and never mind. So make it really simple to copy and paste and to share the information. And then the third is build a calendar to keep everybody on track. We are, as I said, 96 days from Election Day. And so beat the drum, right? So if a Get Out the Vote campaign or any advocacy campaign that has sort of a deadline on it, think about if you're posting once a week, you would get where are we? What would that be? Like 12 posts, maybe 10 posts? No, not 12 posts, right? Math, I'm a journalism major. That's not my strong suit. So about 12 posts. That's fine, but what if you did 20? What if you did 25? What if you did a couple times a week? And that is incredibly hard to do for even the most ardent of social media users if you don't have a plan and you don't know what you're supposed to be posting a couple times a week. So build a calendar to keep everybody on track and really think about it as a steady drumbeat, and that this is the topic that's important to you. This is the topic that you're advocating around. Obviously that topic, you would shift in tone, right? So it could be at this point, shift from like a registration to a remember to mail to all the way to the end of the campaign season. So a calendar will help you think through that trajectory and that cadence. So I found a couple of nice examples. So interestingly, if you Google social media I think social media get out the vote campaign, AAUW comes up first on Google search results. It's old and there are some broken links, but it still comes up first. So there's this first one is a series of images and a toolkit. So AAUW put together a toolkit. I'm going to guess 2016, just based on the broken links and some of the stuff that was on there, but there's still some good content there. So and I don't know where this bit.ly goes, this link that's on here. I don't know where that goes. So it may need to be, would need to be adjusted, but it had some fun messaging. When women vote, they change the conversation. That's great. I love that. So they had, probably a dozen images that you could pull to use on your social media. League of Women Voters also had a pretty extensive toolkit, and that's one of the links that I'll share with you here in a second. And they had these two other images are from League of Women Voters. So they took this kind of meme idea and modified it for their message. This someecards.com lets you make your own meme that looks like this with all kinds of little vintage style images. So taking that concept, which is sort of trend jacking, tagging onto a trend that people sort of recognize immediately and understand immediately. If they're on social, if you've spent any time on social, you've seen this style of image because it comes up a lot, and sometimes they're raunchy jokes, and sometimes they're funny, and sometimes they're dumb, and sometimes they're used with purpose. So there's a whole mix of them. And then the other, this I'm sure is just a stock image within their Vote 411 is their call to action. So just some examples of what I mean when I say toolkit. Great, that's my deck. So I'm going to back out of this. Stop sharing. Oh my God, 33 chats. What are you guys killing me over here? Did I miss any good chats? Any good questions while I'm pulling up my links for you here? So
there are a couple. One was how to do a campaign on Pinterest. I'm going to give an example because this came from Like Oswego. We're doing a campaign. Our advocacy committee is going to be doing a Get Out the Vote campaign. But right now we're going to be doing Chalk the Vote, which is a national movement. And how can we do a campaign over the next 2 weeks on Chalk the Vote?
Sure. Okay. So I want to share with you a couple of things and then I'll answer that specifically. So in the chat, you'll see the League of Women Voters toolkit, and there's a massive Word document that you can download that I swear has 100 posts on it. It's huge. Some for Twitter, some for Facebook, some images, some without. And then this site I thought was really fun. It's called runforsomething.net. And it's a resource guide for people who are running for office. So it's very kind of slightly outside of the scope of what we're talking about, but what it had, and you'll get to it when you look, but I'm going to share this link, is a crowdsourced list of ideas from people who are running for office right now. And are like, well, I can't canvass and I can't go out and talk to people the same way I could. So what can I do? And people are sharing their content ideas. And I found a few things on there that I thought were pretty useful. I mean, some of them not exactly relevant to our purposes, but you can probably get some good content there too. Okay, so a 2-week campaign. Chalk the Vote, and specifically Pinterest or kind of across the board?
I think across the board. I mean, probably Facebook and Pinterest.
Okay, so in a 2-week period, if that's my time limit and I have a call to action, I would probably focus entirely on that content for that 2-week period. So you probably want between 8 and 12 posts for that time period, and I would think about from a like, how do you introduce it? What is it? Be really clear about what your call to action is and where you want to send people. So if you're wanting to send them to a link, for example, You've got to include the link in every single post. If you want all the images to sort of look the same, you can use something like Canva, C-A-N-V-A, will let you build little social graphics. Or Adobe Spark is the one I use a lot. And either one of those, you can pick a template, drop in a graphic, change the text, and everything looks the same. So it's all looks like a campaign. Both of them also have, I think, automatically linked to that Pixabay site I mentioned. So they have a place in the little app where you can search for free photos. So it's all self-contained. And then I would post all of the content on Pinterest. You actually don't need to space it out because Pinterest doesn't work the same way other social networks work. It's more like kind of a mini website is sort of how you want to think about it. So you could build a board, Chalk the Vote 2020, describe it. So in the description for that board, make sure you're using all your keywords. So where is it? When is it? What do you want people to do? Think about what you would search on Google to get that information and then reverse engineer that. So if I'm going to search, how do I register to vote in Oregon? Then you want to answer that question with your content, right? So you want to meet that question. And build the text and the copy of those posts to answer that question or answer the question that you think people are asking. And then you can post all dozen or so of your images with good captions, with hashtags and all of that in right on the board. So you end up with kind of this mini website or this mini bookmarked page with resources. You want to make sure that the hashtags are good and that you're really being thoughtful about descriptions because that's how Pinterest organizes your content. So if you've spent, personally, if you've spent time on Pinterest, you know that when you get on Pinterest, it'll say more ideas. It's always offering you more ideas, and those are based on things that you've looked at, things that you've saved, things that you've pinned. And so the algorithm is extraordinarily smart at finding things that are like the stuff that you've already engaged with. So you want to, so if I've engaged with something related to voting this year, then Pinterest will say, ooh, you are also likely to like this thing. And so I'm going to put it on your feed, or I'm going to add it to your more ideas link.
Kelli?
Yes.
Kelli, I've put on there the link to the state Pinterest page. And so they can click on that and get an idea of something that is not all about recipes and dresses and stuff like that.
Mine are all quotes and nail designs. Mine aren't recipes. No.
So this page has boards that are aligned with the strategic plan for National AAUW. So it has nothing to do with fluff.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and you know, I sort of joke that mine are quotes and nail designs, but I have boards for everything. Like that's the place I save things when I've got boards for a lot of student related stuff. So I've got boards for content, social media content, how to find a job, all sorts of stuff. So it's a extraordinarily helpful resource. I love Pinterest a lot, like more than
I have pretty things and puppies and jewelry and all kinds of nice things like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute me now.
And then I have another question here: how to use Instagram more effectively is the question. So, and then I see how to schedule posts in advance. So I'm going to talk Instagram and I'm going to pull up Facebook so we can keep on track here. So we'll test my multitasking skills at 8 p.m. I'm not going to promise anything. So Instagram more effectively. I would say two things. One is probably post more often. Generally speaking, it's a similar cadence to Facebook. Also, every time I go to pull up Facebook Live, I feel like I should my live Facebook page, I feel like I should probably disclaim that obviously I don't control what my friends are saying on Facebook. So no judgment when I pull this up here. It's always a risk. You just never know. So on Instagram, you probably want to post more often, and you probably want to figure out, you probably want to look at hashtags. Those are the two things that I would say. Those are generally the two easiest is post more often, post good stuff, post good pictures, post quality pictures, and then figure out what the hashtags are that you might want to use. And how do you figure that out? It's not like random some of it's trial and error, but even more useful is to look at posts that look like the posts that you are interested in, or the posts that you may want other people to see. And what hashtags are they using? I'm gonna show you for a second one way to do this, because I have a friend who has this site called a product called Marching in Their Footsteps, which is a design where you can see empowerment of girls and women. There may be some inspiration on this page, I think, for AAUW in general. But they've got all kinds of hashtags, right? So you can see these. There's, there's a misspelling. We should correct that. But there's paving the way, civil rights, women's rights, empower, some names of some key women that they highlight on a regular basis. I'm actually going to back up a little bit. So they've got a mix of, news items, product things. I'm backing up because I helped her with some social content last year for a bit. And I had some, this is my baby and my partner. That's my family. So, and so we used, women's rights, representation matters, female role models. Smash the patriarchy was always a really popular hashtag on our content, which I loved and thought was really fun. So, look at content that works that you like. So go look at posts and accounts that you think do a nice job. And that's what I did to find these, is I just went and looked and so strong women in history, that seems like an interesting hashtag. And so I'm going to click on that and see what's there. So what is this post about? What post do they use, or what hashtags do they use? And so it's a little bit of a rabbit trail and just kind of running, following the trail where it leads. But after you've done that a bit, you get, a dozen or so hashtags that you think might work, and you try them. And then you decide that those don't work, and so you try something else. So, so that's the research process, I guess I would say, for Instagram. So finding some hashtags, choosing good images, and posting more often. Okay, so posting on, let's see. Okay, so if you're, this is, we're gonna show you how to schedule. So you're on your Facebook post, on your Facebook page, and you're writing some stuff. And then it says, so if you've ever scheduled anything before, Facebook likes to change things all the time. Maddening. So rather than create a post like you normally would, you actually want to use this publishing tools link. That's how you schedule things now. You can do that. Honestly, I often forget, because I'll get in here to schedule something and I'll be like, where's my scheduling button? And so I often forget, and then I just get to it from here. You can also get to it from the top of the page. So it's up here under the More button. There's Publishing Tools. And then when you click on that, you get this less user-friendly interface to schedule, but this is where you do it. You create your post here. Drop in what you want to say. And then here's your scheduling part, right? So I want to schedule. I'm going to schedule it for Friday. Let's do AM instead of PM. That's going to be public, which is fine. If I want to restrict it, I can. I don't necessarily recommend doing that from this place because it will lower the number of people who see your content, not raise it. But if you wanted to play with it and see what it does for you, a restricted audience, I can restrict it so only people who are over 21 will see my post. Only people in Eugene would see my post, for example. So, or what could be useful is if your page is bilingual, you can restrict so that you're only seeing the language that you're I would only see English because that's my language on Facebook. That's what Facebook recognizes as my language. And then newsfeed targeting is a little more nuanced than that. So it's not restricted, but it's focusing. So I can focus, and here's where you can, the questions about privacy earlier, here's where you can freak out about how much Facebook knows about you. Because I can target people by interest, let's see, I can target people who are, what is it going to let me do here? Not much. Okay, so I can target people who are into yoga or like certain food and drink. I really like wine. So I'm going to target people who like yoga and wine. That's my target. They're probably older, so I can narrow that down. Might be all women. I can add just Oregon. So I can narrow this so that it's not restricting, it's prioritizing. So that's kind of the difference there. And again, for organic posts, probably don't need to worry about it. It's actually the exact same system that you use for advertising, the same sort of options for advertising. So you have some options there. You can also share to Instagram at the same time. I don't have Instagram hooked up for this page on here, but if you wanted to double post, you can. I don't have anything there, but you get the idea. I can post and then push schedule. And then when I do that, it will show up in this center part here. And I can look at published posts, scheduled posts, drafts. If you wanted other people to look at your stuff, you can save them as drafts. And if you want posts to expire, so they're only on your page for a certain amount of time, you can do that and see when things are expiring. It has this alert up here for Creator Studio. So when you're ready to get fancy, you can get into Creator Studio and it's a little bit different way to manage your content and manage your stuff. I guess I would mostly say, don't worry about it. Publishing tools is probably all you need, but that's what it's asking. That's the Creator Studio thing is another content management place for Facebook. Okay, so there was something else on Facebook, another question on Facebook, and I can't remember what it was. Somebody remind me.
Going live.
Oh, going live, that's right. Okay, so if you want to go live on Facebook, the biggest thing to make sure that you have is Wi-Fi or a really good signal, because that is often the biggest barrier to going live.
Why would people go live?
So let's see. So you could go live at an event. Often is a live. You can go live for like a Q&A. So maybe you. Let's go back to that. Every month we have a meeting. So how can we break that up? One piece of content that you could do to promote your meeting would be a live Q&A with your speaker for like 10 minutes before the thing. What are you going to talk about? Who the heck are you? What's this? Why should people be excited about this? So it's not your whole meeting, which feels heavy. Like, I don't know that live would be useful in that context, but it's a teaser, and it's just and anytime you go live, Facebook stores that video as a post. So it's not just you miss that 10-minute live thing and too bad, so sad. But now you have a piece of content, a piece of video content on your page that hangs out there forever. It's just a piece of content. So it can be a way, then it becomes shareable, right? So you can add it to an email reminder that goes out. You can add it, you can boost it. So you can maybe put $10 behind it and reach a new audience, for example. So, so I think it works great. I think live works great for creating little bonus types of content. I don't know that in fact, I probably wouldn't recommend going live with a regular meeting, but rather finding ways to use live as a teaser, I think could be a better way to do that. But if you have another event, that could be a great, live could be a great way to bring people in to that event. Remember, breaking down those barriers of what do I expect if I'm thinking about being a member. What do I expect? Well, you can expect some pretty cool stuff, and here's a couple of examples of that. But there are some tech considerations, so make sure that you have that Wi-Fi, or you have good access. Maybe you have a little tripod thingy for your phone, that you think about, where the phone sits in relation to the thing that's going on. Our hands are not very good tripods. So we move too much, and we make people motion sick. So be thoughtful about how people will see your content as you think about going live.
Kelly, do you remember when you tried to do a Facebook Live last summer at the conference?
Oh, I think you did it. Didn't you? We tried it and we missed half of it or something.
Oh, well, we did a little one of you doing your presentation, part of your presentation.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that part. We did some of it live during, right?
Yes.
You do
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's on the Facebook page.
There you go. So you can go watch me.
Repost it.
Everyone loves to watch themselves. So I can tell you how often I've watched that video. Let's see. Every time Facebook updates, privacy parameters change. Yep, for sure. So if you're worried, and you should be concerned about your personal privacy, always good to keep track of that stuff. Go check your settings. Make sure that your people who you intend to see your content are seeing it and no one else. It's that all of that can be useful. What's not useful or true is when you see those things going around that's like, I hereby reject Facebook's. It's like some legalese about Facebook content and how you don't give Facebook the right to use your stuff. That don't share that. That's not actually true or binding or anything. You signed the terms and conditions a long time ago when you set up your account, and that doesn't change. Your terms and conditions don't change. But you can go opt out of pages that you've opted into. You can make sure that you're not logging into everything with your Facebook account. Even though it's super easy, but you can go into your settings and back out some of those permissions. Just make sure you pay attention, because when Facebook changes, anytime you see like an interface change or a new feature, that should be a trigger to go take a peek and just make sure that that your privacy settings are as you intend. Facebook has, post Cambridge Analytica, has made doing that easier. So if Facebook gets any credit, it does get a little credit for making it easier to find and adjust your security settings and providing some information and guides on how to do that. From a advertiser's perspective, so my seat where I'm looking for how do I find people and how do I reach people with advertising, Facebook is much more restricted than it used to be in terms of the information that I have available to me for targeting, or the information that anyone has available for targeting, and the way that you can set up ads. So there have been some pretty substantial changes in the last couple of years from that perspective. So I used to be able to target people by income and political affiliation, and I can't do that anymore. And I don't mean me specifically. I actually never targeted someone for political affiliation and ads. But that's something, those are some changes that Facebook has made post the Cambridge Analytica scandal a couple years ago. People are still meddling, but I guess Facebook's trying to be a little more transparent. Did I answer all the questions?
I have one, Kelly, and I think it got lost in the chat. And
Okay.
that is, do you suggest setting up a branch account for each of the media that you described tonight? Or would it, because I'm thinking as one goes on, when we're done leaving our position and someone else takes over, how does that transition work?
Sure. So yes, I would definitely set up branch owned accounts, I guess, for lack of a better word. And you always want to make sure that you have on Facebook at least 2 people who are admins. Then if somebody transitions out or moves away, you don't have to track them down to get the credentials. You always have at least 2 people. I'd say more is fine. And everybody doesn't need to be an admin, but as long as you have some continuity there. And so Facebook has specifically where you can have multiple admins. So we can all have our own personal Facebook accounts and then also be admins on pages. It's like what I just showed you. I'm an admin on the Eugene Opera page. I didn't have to log out of my personal and log back in. So I'm an admin on that. Now, the other platforms, you can do some sort of joint stuff with Instagram, even just in that quick look. So there is some syncing that you can do from Facebook to Instagram. But if you're using Instagram on your phone, that's password. So that would be sharing the password with whoever needs the password. I'm an advocate of apps like premium versions of apps like LastPass because they're encrypted. Yeah, and you're not writing down, don't email your passwords, for crying out loud. Using something like LastPass, you can add users to LastPass and share passwords there. So I appreciate that starts to feel a little clunky, right? So if I can't just give you a password. Now I have to have this other app where I'm sharing passwords. People get hacked all the time. I don't know how many people have offered me Ray-Ban sunglasses in the last dozen years from hacks on Twitter and Facebook, but it's a lot. And so that password situation is really important. And I don't know, for those of you who might have, no one probably noticed, but a handful of obnoxious Twitter users. But a couple of weeks ago, there was a Twitter hack where it ended up being some teenage kid that hacked verified accounts. So hacked like Joe Biden and Elon Musk and some of these big verified accounts. What were they sharing? Oh, it was a Bitcoin scam. So all of a sudden, Joe Biden, I think it was Barack Obama too, were like, click here for Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. So most people appreciated that looked scammy. Apparently enough people did not that he made a couple $100,000. Yeah. So pro tip, don't give anyone money on the internet like that. So so be careful. But hacks happen all the time. And it was funny because I didn't notice that. And I have a verified account on Twitter because I've been on it forever and blah, blah, blah. And I happened to catch this window where they were verifying people. And so my Twitter was down and I couldn't figure out why. But I was kind of caught up in that hack, even though I wasn't hacked. Of course, I'm not nearly important enough for some teenage kid to hack my personal account. But Twitter had to pull down all the verified accounts and figure out what the hack was before they went back up. So hacks happen all the time. So I know it feels cumbersome, but I've had clients who have had, I have a client that is a leather goods manufacturer, and PETA hacked their account a couple of years ago and posted some very PETA-like images on their Instagram account. It took some doing to unwind that and to get that figured out. It happens all the time. So it's worth the effort to make sure that your passwords are protected. Make sure that they're strong. Make sure that you change them as people cycle out. Password is not a good password. Password 123, not any better. So, find it. And the cool thing about LastPass as an app, and there are others that do the same thing, is you can click strong password and it fills it in and gives you this thing that no one ever remembers, but you don't have to, because it's all attached to this single place. So that's the one I've used for years. But there are others that do similar things. The idea is it's somewhere not in your head and not in your email, encrypted, so that you can share it safely. And anytime I have to share passwords that they're not, I can't just share them from LastPass. I grab a screenshot and send it as a flat image, as opposed to put the password in an email. Don't do that. Your IT people will thank me for telling you that. Don't.
So Kelly?
Yeah.
There was a question in the chat about the use of LinkedIn.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, what do you have to say about that?
So I actually waffled quite a bit about whether I should add LinkedIn to my chart as I was prepping over the last couple of weeks and thinking about adding that. So I would say it can be an extraordinarily powerful tool, especially if you can get your members to leverage their personal LinkedIn. So you would have, the way I would set it up would be to have a branch page on LinkedIn, and then have people who are members and board members attach themselves to that page. So on LinkedIn, for those of you who are on LinkedIn, you can add your employers. You can also add your volunteer roles. And so when you do that, you can connect your profile to the branch profile. And that helps people to find people. So if I'm interested in who do I know that's involved with AAUW, I can find that. If I'm interested in connecting with other people, or if I'm interested in connecting with somebody in another area, I can do that. And then the content could come from your, you can post updates from your branch page, and then again, encourage your members to share that post. You can also, when you tag people in those posts, that automatically adds to the taggee's feed. So if you posted something about camp and you tag the person who was speaking, if you tagged me, it would show up in my feed. So people who follow me or connected with me would see that information. And that's a uniquely powerful component of LinkedIn, is that algorithm. The way that specific algorithm works on LinkedIn is how, I guess aggressive is probably the word I would use, how aggressive Facebook shares out content from people who you're first and second degree connected to on in their newsfeed. So I'm constantly seeing things from people that I'm not connected to, because Georgia and I made our first degree connections, and she's tagged, and Nancy, we're maybe not connected, but you like what Georgia said, then I'm seeing your content, like it's windy, it winds around and gets knotted. But what it does is it helps people find people, like-minded people. So you find people who are interested in similar things. Nice thing about LinkedIn is you don't have to post as often. So you can post once every week or two and you're in good shape, because that algorithm has about a 2-week lifespan. Posts have about a 2-week lifespan before they drop off. You can post more often, but you don't have to. So when I'm managing a LinkedIn presence for brands, I put the very most important brand content on LinkedIn, tag partners, tag people who are involved with that, and kind of let it run its course. So probably every week or two. So it's not as hungry a beast as some of the other platforms are. But I think definitely worth exploring. Now, I would talk to your membership, see who has a profile, see who's active, and see if that makes sense. Again, based on what you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to reach. But you do have to have kind of a foundation in your branch in order to build from that and in order to build and reach people. LinkedIn advertising is stupid expensive, so don't bother. But if you can connect with people, and you have a good base in your membership that can help you branch out, that can be really powerful. So
Kelli, I think that's really a key point for all of our branches, because we don't know how many of our members are on Facebook or LinkedIn, and to think that we can adopt all of these platforms with volunteers who may not know that much about it is not very realistic. But it sounds to me like what you are suggesting is the first thing we need to do is find out how many of our members are active on these platforms and which ones we can really utilize to best advantage. So that is, I think, a key takeaway from this whole conversation.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to your members. I would say the only slight small caveat I would give to that is if you have somebody who just really loves Pinterest, go for it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
It may be more of a sandbox versus a core part of maybe your communication strategy, but I'm a big fan of not stretching yourself too thin. So picking one or two platforms and using those and doing it well. But if somebody walked in and said, I think your branch needs a TikTok and I'm willing to manage it, I'd be like, knock yourself out. Like, that's great. Let's give it a shot and see what happens.
Anybody else have other questions? I know Kelli probably has some family things she needs to do.
So I had a question about hard copy. Happy to do that. So I'll send that to Nancy, and then I will also include those links that I posted in the chat just in case they got lost, so that you can add those. And then, you know, if you have things that come up or questions, let me know. I'm on all the social media, so you can find me.
And I did put in the chat, but I forgot to mention earlier, obviously Kelli is on the tech committee, and Georgia Applegate is the chair of that committee. It's now a standing committee of AAUW Oregon, yay, because we really need it. And Kelli is an active member of the Eugene branch as of last summer. Yay, good. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Kelli. As usual, super informative, really, really helpful.
AAUW is the most fun. Love it. Thank you,
Good.
guys.
Glad to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll see you tomorrow night, campers, with Trish Garner. Nancy, any words to the wise at the end?
I think I'm going to go have s'mores. That's all I got.
That's good. They're kind of messy in front of the computer. Okay, thanks again,
Thank you all for
Kelli.
coming. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
What's our camp? Do we have a camp salute?
Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.